Welcome to Everyday Passions, the show where my guests share one of their passions and how they've used this passion to influence or impact the lives of others. My special guest today is Maribel Cardez. Welcome, Maribel.
Thank you, Yvonne. Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm delighted to have you. Now, I'm your host, Yvonne A. Jones, the Client Relations Specialist. Leaders and decision makers consult with me when they want to grow their business by building strong client relationships, profitable client relationships. So welcome to our viewers, our listeners, because this is going to be both a video on YouTube and it's also going to be a podcast later on. So we thank you and appreciate you for joining us today. So let me share a little bit about Maribel. Trained in situational leadership, Maribel Cardez has held senior leadership positions in human resources, administration, and marketing. With a keen focus on training and development, Maribel is an advocate for organizational transformation that leads to greater employee and customer experiences. She's a woman after my heart. She's a spirited enthusiast for personal development. So Maribel, it's my delight to have you on the show, Everyday Passions, and our audience is eager to hear. What is one of the things that you're truly passionate about?
Well, Yvonne, again, thank you very much. That was a great introduction, and I'm glad that we share some commonalities. So I think that's really exciting.
It is.
In thinking about what I'm passionate about, I've done different things throughout my career, as you just shared with your audience regarding my background. The thing that I think I found the most passion in is in learning and development, but primarily personal development. And now, of course, personal development is about developing yourself as an individual. So I do, flip the camera and look at myself when I think about personal development. And I spent probably a good part of 2020 doing a lot of self-discovery work. I think 2020 impacted many of us similarly in different ways. And I think a lot of us were on a mission to discover our purpose in life and discover the meaning of life in a sense, right? So for me, on this journey of self-discovery, personal development became an even greater piece of the process for me, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it important for me? You spend your life going through your career. And as you mentioned already, I've done a few different things throughout my career, and you never really stop to think about, you're just doing, you never stop to think about what is it that you're most passionate about? What is it that you're interested in doing? And it's when life creates those little curveballs, whether you've been downsized out of your position, laid off, however you want to refer to it, that you really start to think about, well, what's next in life for me, right? So personal development became really big for me, as well as writing. I started writing a lot more. I used to write a lot before, and a lot of it's, writing just for myself. I haven't published much of it. I recently started publishing through Biz Catalyst, that you're familiar with as well. So that's been fun for me. And I've done some writing, again, like I said, just for myself. And sharing some of the knowledge that I've acquired is really the next mission for me in life. All right. So as I've gone through my journey of self-discovery and trying to identify the thing that I am most passionate about, it always goes back to learning, to development personally. And so what I want to do with that is take that to the next level and share, perhaps with your viewing audience, and opportunities that I'm in the process of developing and creating right now, along the lines of personal development.
Awesome. So, Maribel, what I heard you say a few things. And normally I would ask what event, and I still am going to ask it because you pinpointed 2020, and we all know, the world knows, the major thing that shifted for many, that created a shift for many of us in 2020. But was there a particular event that created that discovery or awareness that you decided to go back and focus on personal development? Because I hear that a lot. And I love the fact that you're not just focused on other people, helping other people with their personal development, but as you say, you flip the camera and you're focused on developing yourself, because frankly, if you don't have it to give, then you can't really be a transformational agent for anybody else. So you have to transform yourself first. So was there a particular point in 2020 or an event that really caused you to really kind of turn that searchlight?
Well, Yvonne, you just said a bunch of really, really powerful things, and you really touched on a lot of what's occurred, I guess, in my life to get me down the path that I'm on now. And I made reference to 2020 because that for me really was a turning point. It really predates 2020, where I started on my own path several years back, and the last client that I had signed on, actually, I went to work for them full time. What was supposed to have been a 1-year time frame, it turned into 3.5 years instead. So it derailed me a little bit from continuing down the path that I was on initially. And that came to, it was a 3.5-year period. March of 2019 was when I stopped working for them as an employee. And I went back to doing some workshops in a subcontract capacity for another training group that I was with previously. And that was exciting for me. I had an opportunity to go back and do a lot of cultural diversity training, diversity and inclusion, which I was doing back in 2014 and 15. And you've seen how this has blown up. I mean, this is a huge marketplace right now. And I hate to even make reference to it as a marketplace, but, there are companies that are really adhering to making changes, cultural changes within their organization, and really embrace the whole concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and belonging for that matter. There are others that are doing it, Joe, so just to simply check a box, right? So thinking through all of those things is what's had me on this journey already and on this path. And 2020 just really sealed it for me. I think what 2020 did to me, and I'm going to be very vulnerable and honest with you here, 2020 put me in a position of, unfortunately, visiting these places that many of us have visited throughout our careers. And that's imposter syndrome, self-doubt, lack of self-confidence, because you start to question yourself, like, where am I? And what is it that I'm really trying to accomplish in life? And then because I got a taste of being an employee again, I decided to go down that path and looking for a job, basically, if you will, but more from a career standpoint, what's next for me? And I thought I'd take all of the things that I've done throughout my career and you put them to use as an employee in an organization. Well, it became super difficult. It's like, I don't know if the resume is not right, if there's definitely something not happening. And I think maybe it's the clue that I have to kind of pick up and say, okay, maybe you're supposed to stay on your own at this point, But you go through these things of, the imposter syndrome. You've seen a lot of people writing about this stuff in the last couple of years, more so than in previous years. I had my first encounter with imposter syndrome before I even knew what it was. And that was in 2013. My position at the bank that I was with was eliminated at the end of 2012. And that's when I then started my journey of what's next in life for me. Usually that's the time that we decide to make those types of changes by force almost, right? So you start to look at that. And I can tell you maybe 8 months into it, I was starting to feel like, who am I? What is it that I do? Because when we identify with what we do for a living as who we are, that's where the troubles first really begin. And I want to
absolutely.
I want to share that with
you. Please speak to that a little bit more in a little bit more detail, because you are so right. I see people saying, I am, and they, it's as if it represents who they are and nobody else. So if that rug is pulled from under them, they're lost. So Maribel, that's a great point. Please speak to us a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Yvonne, because it is so true. You know, we identify with what we do for a living, and the minute we're no longer doing those things at our places of employment, we start to feel lost, and we start to feel like a fraud. You feel like, you know, I got lucky when I got that promotion. When that position ended, I was the vice president of administration in a mortgage division for a sizable bank here in South Florida. So clearly I couldn't have gotten there just by luck, right? So I had to have contributed to it, but we start to question our abilities, unfortunately. And going into 2020, it happened even more for me, where now it also contributed to a lack of self-confidence, because you start to really question yourself, and you feel like, what have I really done? But when you start to take inventory, and this is probably the best advice that I can give anyone, is sit down and start to take inventory of the things that you have accomplished and understand how you accomplished those. No one handed anything to you. You accomplished these things because you took the time to do the work, you acquired the knowledge, you implemented the things that you learned, and you got on the other side of that emotion, of those feelings. And I can tell you that for me, a good part of 2020 with COVID, in full bloom, really, really impacted me in that way. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. And I think that if I can share it with others, I think it may help others as well. It really carried into late 2020 when I had those same emotions and those same feelings, yet I continued to push myself to look for work or to think about what's next in life for me. And quite honestly, one of the things that came out of this, which is really beautiful when they say that out of these, crisis and disaster moments is when beauty is born. This is when business ideas come to fruition as well. For me, what happened was that I focused more on personal development and knew that if I was feeling the way I was feeling, that others were probably going through very similar things, right? And what is it that we always go to? We draw to fear, right? Fear is the thing that holds us back from doing the things that we want to move forward and do, whether it's being afraid of change, which I'm not afraid of change. I embrace change. And I've been pretty flexible throughout my career. That's what allowed me to move into different areas. And do different things, which is great because it allowed me to acquire a different skill set and different knowledge, if you will. But a lot of people are afraid to do things because they're afraid of sounding silly or looking stupid or sounding stupid, just to be quite honest. Fear of judgment is also a big one. And I know I've suffered from some of that. So as you tell yourself, that little voice inside your head that keeps telling you these things about who you are and who you're not, I'll tell you, when it changed for me, and I'm still working on some of this, it'll never go away. That's the first thing I want to make sure I'm clear about. Fear will always be with you, and you just have to invite this stuff in and embrace it and just accept the fact that it's there and make it your friend, help it push you and motivate you, as opposed to allowing it to stop you from doing things. But what changed for me, Yvonne, and this is a big one, I think, when I started to define imposter syndrome and that lack of self-confidence and the self-doubt that I was unfortunately overwhelmed with, when I identified and defined it as self-gaslighting, there was a little bulb that went off for me. Something happened. Instead of a light bulb, it was more like a jolt or a lightning bolt or so. And in doing that, I thought, when we read about gaslighting, and some of us have experienced gaslighting at our places of employment, when something's going on and you share it and they say to you, oh, that's all in your head. That's not really happening, right? Well, when I looked at that as imposter syndrome and all the things that are associated with it as self-gaslighting, that's when it started to change for me, because I know what it feels like to be gaslit. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, Yvonne, or maybe I'm sure there's people in your viewing audience that are probably in their heads. Yes.
They may not know the name. They may not know the term, because the first time I heard that term, I didn't know what it meant. And then as soon as it was explained to me, I think maybe you were the person who told me what that was. And I said, oh, yeah. And I'm sure there are lots of other people who may not know the term, but you're clearly explaining what that means. And before you, yeah, I wanted to finish about that self-gaslighting because that created a transformation for you. So I would love for you to help anyone who is having those doubts, those fears, to see how you help yourself because they might get some support as well.
I believe so too. And I think that's a big one. And this is why when I use the term personal development, Yvonne, I'm thinking more about just acquiring knowledge and going out there and researching this stuff and learning as much as you can about it, because that's what helped me. And before I even knew, in 2013, 14, that's when I started to experience imposter syndrome. I didn't even know it was a thing. So I went out and as I started to read articles, I realized that's what I'm feeling. That's what I'm going through. So I researched it more. And imposter syndrome has been around since the 1970s. Right. And folks can go out there and research this stuff and really read about it. But the whole gaslighting thing, this is a term that's been used over the last handful of years, more so than I had ever heard it before. I think I probably heard the term gaslit or gaslighting maybe just 3 or 4 years ago. But it actually comes from a movie from the 1940s where a husband was actually gaslighting his wife and he was dimming the gas lights that were in the neighborhood, or maybe they were in the home. I can't remember exactly, but he was making her think that she was losing her mind. And she's like, but I know that this happened. And she would describe things to him that were happening. And he would say, no, it's all in your head. And that's where the term comes from. And it's been used in the workplace. It's been used in politics. It's been used pretty heavily. So imposter syndrome and gaslighting, I encourage your viewing audience to go out and just read about this stuff, because what it does is that it validates the things that you're experiencing, the things that you're feeling, and it does help put you at ease. I took it a step further and started to develop a program, because what good is knowledge that we acquire if we're not sharing it? So I started to develop a personal development program, which I can talk a little bit about, or I think that may even be the lead-in into your next question, perhaps.
Yes, but you have answered my question so many times over, because my question would have been, how has this discovery of this passion for personal development impacted? How have you used that to impact the lives of others? Right now, you have impacted the lives of many people by just what you shared. But I believe you also use the term embrace the fear, because you're so right. Fear is always going to be with us in some shape or form. So we have to embrace it and use it as a fuel, use it to motivate us, because it's going to be there. So if we want to continue to rise, or we want to achieve what our goals or our vision is for ourselves and our business, if we have one, then we have to embrace that. So I believe there's something you can share with us about that, Maribel. How has this taken you to this place where you are now, and how can you impact the lives of others even more? Because I think that's so very important in this post-COVID, although COVID is still rampant, but in this what is considered the post-COVID era, where there's uncertainty, there are fears, there's just everything that's affecting people. Talk to us about that, please. And we have like about 5 minutes, so you can talk about it in 5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay. Well, here's what I'd like to do, actually. So we mentioned embrace, and embrace the fear or embrace the change are actually the names of the 2 programs that I'm pretty close to finishing and almost ready to launch. But I'll just walk you very quickly through the embrace. The initial part of the process is we're all going through a journey, right? And what we all need to understand is that there's a certain amount of work that goes into it. So I've taken the word embrace and I've created an acronym out of it. And so I'm using a handful of words. So it's evolve, move, believe, rise, assess, commit, and execute. And basically what I'm saying with those words, that's using embrace as an acronym for those words. Evolving means that we have to have a growth mindset. I know that this is something you and I share similarly, because we've talked about these things before as well. Having a growth mindset and releasing yourself of those limiting beliefs and moving, taking action, believing in yourself, critically important, rising, stop shrinking for the sake and the comfort of others, right? Because we all have certain gifts, certain values that we can share with others as well. So another really important part of the process is stopping and assessing where you are. I mentioned earlier about taking inventory of the accomplishments and the achievements. We don't celebrate ourselves enough, and we really need to celebrate those accomplishments. We absolutely do. And just making a commitment, commit to yourself, commit to your journey that you are going to move forward as you just, identify that passion, whatever that passion might be. And it may not be a passion, it may be just something you like to do. Explore it, right? But execute. That's the last word in embrace. And the last E is to execute. Ensure that you are executing on whatever goals you've set for yourself, if in fact you have set some. Because I've talked to some folks. One of the things that this really does for me is that I've shared it with friends and family, and then you really start to understand who you can share certain things with and who you can't, right? Friends and family mean well, but they want to keep you as safe as possible, right? But you realize that not everyone shares the same passions in life that you do, for learning, for establishing goals. Some folks are content where they are, and no judgment. That's great, because what's important is happiness. And I think if you're happy with whatever it is you're doing, then there's no need to overwhelm yourself. But if you're looking to do more, then just understand that it does require work. It requires work, and just getting comfortable. And you've heard this before, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's another really important message that needs to be delivered here today.
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness. You have shared so much. So this journey, I just want to wrap up this journey that you're inviting people to go on, Maribel, of embracing the fear, embracing all those thoughts that they think. But the ultimate thing I hear at the end of it is execute, which means take action. Because if we take no action, then we're just in the same place that we always were. So we have to take action.
That's right.
But you mentioned the journey. So on the other side of the journey, I know there's something else. You want to just quickly mention that? I give you 2 minutes to mention that part of the other side of the journey.
Okay, we can do that, or I can do a part 2 to this interview one day and share the rest of it. But very quickly, once you go through this journey, you're going through a transformation, which Yvonne talked about before, that we are all going through different types of transformations. And these transitions take us through a process where what you eventually find on the other side of all of this work that you've done on the journey side, and you achieve these discoveries. And the discoveries are, again, using the word embrace as an acronym. And I'm just going to run through the words, and I don't know if there's going to be enough time to really address all of these, but the first E is for embodiment. M is for mission. B is bravery. R is resilience. The A is agency. And that's a really big one that we could probably spend an entire 20 minutes talking about. So we'll have to come back to that one. C is confidence, and the E is excellence. So at the end of the day, what we're doing is that we're executing to reach that point of excellence. And let's not confuse excellence with perfection, because that'll really stunt you at that point. It just absolutely will, right? We can try to achieve perfection, but really, as long as you reach that point of excellence, meaning that you've accomplished what you set out to do. And that very first one, the E for embodiment, really important, because when you walk through that journey and you start to embrace the things that we've been fearful of, what happens is that you are now the embodiment of all the things that you wanted to do. Because everything, when you believe in yourself, everything that you need is already deep within you. You just have to dig deep and find it.
Pull it out.
Yes.
And I love that what you said about it. Forget about perfection, because then if you strive for perfection, you're actually going to find that you are experiencing the other F, which is not fear, but frustration. And frustration can have a negative impact on you, so that you get back in that cycle where you think, am I worth it? Am I doing anything? Who am I to think? So it's a vicious cycle that we want to avoid. Oh, Maribel, you have shared so much value today. I just love this. I wasn't expecting all of this. This was awesome.
Great.
Thank you for being here. Thank you. You shared a lot. I appreciated how vulnerable you made yourself. And that makes you relatable. And I know that there are some, there are many people, both men and women in our audience who can relate to that. Who recognize that we don't have to always, because a lot of times we just believe we have to pretend that everything is going well in our lives. So and it's not, and it just puts more stress on us. That's all it does. So thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for voicing what many of us have experienced in the past and will continue to experience, because as you sagely said, fear is always going to be there. How we respond to the fear is what is important.
That's excellent.
Thank you.
Yvonne, thank you so much. That was excellent. I really appreciate your recap of all of that, because you've nailed it. So again, thank you for having me on your program. This has been a lot of fun, and I'd love to do a part 2 at some point in the future.
We will. We will, no doubt about that. So wonderful. To our wonderful, amazing audience, thank you so much for being here. I apologize. I didn't even go back and recap where we were for anyone who came in late, but I got so caught up. Maribel and I got so caught up in this presentation. I loved you being here, Maribel. Thank you so much. And I look forward to everyone having look forward to having you again. And everyone, please have a wonderful rest of your day.
Wonderful. Thank you, Yvonne.
You're welcome.